Who is running America really? I'm going to submit to you that it's this gentleman right here. And if you don't recognize this picture, this is Vladimir Putin. And he's the Russian strongman, currently in control of Russia, and in my opinion, in control of America. Now, you might say that no, Donald Trump is the president of the United States, and we have a Congress, and we have a Supreme Court, and they are our three branches of government. But I will submit to you that at least one of those branches has abdicated their responsibility as far as being one of the checks and balances. Now let me make my case. As far as I'm concerned, Donald Trump has been in the pocket of the Russians since at least 2013. I picked that date because that was the date that Donald Trump was over in Russia for the Miss Universe pageant, and I firmly believe that the Russians got him caught up with a bunch of prostitutes in the quote-unquote piss tape. And if you don't know what the piss tape is, do your own research. But there supposedly is a tape of Russian prostitutes performing that particular act on Mr. Trump. But as far as I'm concerned, they already had him for several years, and I'll say as early as 2009. I say 2009 because in 2009, Trump went through the last of his business bankruptcies, where he filed bankruptcy for the Taj Mahal and basically stuck his creditors, including major U.S. banks, for a ton of money. Now that doesn't count all of the contractors, employees, etc. But it was the banks that he stuck that caused him to have to look for alternative financing. Now, anybody that's into real estate knows if you are a building, you need bank financing in order to complete your project. If you are running golf courses, you need bank financing in order to generate capital, which in turn is to be repaid through the cash flow of the golf course. And Donald Trump owns some major golf courses. So, 2009, he files his bankruptcy. He screws Chase and all of the major banks in the United States. And he also, I'll let you know, screwed Deutsche Bank, which is a large, well, it's the largest bank in Germany. Screwed them as well. But for some reason, when he goes out for financing that he can't get in America, he is able to get brand new financing from Deutsche Bank. Now, if you just got screwed by somebody, what would make you want to loan money to them again, especially in the real estate market, which runs hot and cold? The answer is if you have a guarantee. In this particular case, Deutsche Bank, I believe, if the money can be followed, has received the guarantee of the autocrats in the Soviet Union, in Russia, which include Vladimir Putin. Now, Deutsche Bank has already been found guilty and been fined billions, and I do mean billions of dollars for money laundering. The money laundering they did was for the Russians. So there is your connection as far as the reason why Deutsche Bank would loan money to Donald Trump. And it is rumored that he currently owes them about $300 million. Now, Trump's golf courses are not doing well. Yes, they have major names, but the PGA has pulled some of its tournaments from the Trump golf courses. And the new course that Trump somehow magically was able to acquire over in Scotland and refurbish that property, it is not doing that well at the present time, i.e., it's not generating sufficient cash flow in order to cover the financing that it's obtained, which again is through Deutsche Bank. So why is Deutsche Bank remaining quiet? Because they have a guarantee. They have the guarantee of the people that they are helping or have helped in the past to launder money for, i.e. the Russians, i.e. Vladimir Putin. All right, so as far as I'm concerned, that basically establishes a line between Donald Trump and the Russians. So the Russians have always, well, Vladimir Putin anyway, has always hated the United States and decided that they were going to try to do as much damage to us as possible. Now, even they didn't think that Donald Trump could win the election, but they figured if they could do enough damage to Hillary Clinton, even if she was elected, her ability to be a force in the world would be substantially diminished. So, Mr. Putin, who is a former intelligence officer from the KGB, who's used to thinking 4 and 5 and 6 moves ahead, decides that now is the time for Donald Trump, who is in his pocket, to run for president. Now, I know that they must have run like thousands or tens of thousands of possible scenarios and conditions which would lead to his election. And when they were sufficiently satisfied that they could at least get him close and also obtain their goal of jacking the Clintons, they pushed him. And he decided to run. Now, if you weren't aware of it, he had thought about running 4 years prior and had dropped all kinds of hints. Now, I don't know whether this was the Russians, and it might have been, but the time at that point wasn't quite right. But they felt that this particular time, given all of the groundwork that they had laid, and by groundwork I mean they had set Trump up as far as the birtherism groups were concerned, attacking President Obama, which, let's just be straight about this, about 30% of the country were all for, okay, which helped to divide the country as far as those that supported Obama and those that hated him. And I'm not even going to call them racist. I'm just going to say that they are racially challenged. He also, at that point, had his bots set up so that he could dictate information that was going to hit the social media networks. I'm talking about Facebook, Twitter, etc. So here we go. Donald Trump declares that he's running for president. Okay? And again, it was easy for him to take on that nationalist persona because he was already a xenophobe, a racist, and a misogynist. His first official act was to come down that escalator and start attacking Mexicans and shortly thereafter Muslims, and then black people in America. Now, he gained traction because of his name recognition and his attacks on the establishment and the birtherism issue. He also was able to find the soft spot with a lot of Americans who had felt that they had gotten screwed and had not recovered from the 2007-2008 recession. So Donald Trump, name recognition, starts promising the world to the everyday guy, and they started swallowing. The Russians are coordinating with his campaign, again through the use of bots, and they were successful in being able to draw a wedge within the country. Now, this all went down obviously before the GOP convention. And the GOP establishment contracted with Fusion in order to see what was going down with Donald Trump around the world. Fusion hires an investigator who is super familiar, trusted by the FBI, CIA, and other intelligence agencies as one of the top people as far as knowledge of Russians. And Mr. Steele uses his contacts and discovers Trump's major involvement with the Russians. Now, once that is said, and let me back up a minute. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the establishment Republicans are getting their ass kicked by Trump because he starts giving them nicknames and starts pounding on them, pounding on them, pounding on them, and none of them had the balls to fight back. Okay. The dossier is generated, and Mr. Steele, who is tight with the FBI, decides he's going to give up this information directly to the FBI through, of all people, the senator from Arizona who currently is ill, that's John McCain. He's going to give that information to McCain, who in turn gets it into the FBI. Here comes the GOP convention, and all kinds of people from the Trump campaign are meeting with all kinds of people from Russia. Now, this also includes Paul Manafort, who came on and was employed by the campaign for 6 months, long enough to get Trump through the GOP convention, because Manafort had had a lot of experience here. But Manafort also had major ties with the Russians, okay? And as a matter of fact, one of his deals went south, and a Russian is currently suing him in the U.S. courts for, I believe, approximately $16 million. It was Manafort who went to the GOP platform committee and got a ton of negative stuff against the Russians pulled, so that the platform was Russia light. Okay, we had constantly, through Obama, been going after the Russians because of all the stuff that was going down with the Ukraine and money laundering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now all of a sudden, the Republicans, who in the past have been major Russian antagonists, now all of a sudden they start to turn a blind eye to the Russians, and they start going soft. Okay, now Trump wins the GOP nomination. Okay, the Russians, meanwhile, are tightening their grip, and they go up to Trump Towers, meet with Trump Jr. to again discuss releasing or reducing the sanctions against certain Russian autocrats so that they can start moving their money around the world again. And in particular, there's a deal with Chevron that's like $750 billion oil deal that got stopped. Obviously, Putin, who's tied in with the oil company through one of his buddies, he definitely wants that lifted because that's money in the bank for him. And for some reason, the Trump campaign lies about it. Okay, now Trump is running against Clinton, and here comes the Trump tape where he talks about grabbing women by the pussies. Oh my God! Now the GOP, their hands are up in the air, and how can they, they can't support somebody like this, etc., etc., etc. That lasted 2 days until WikiLeaks releases the 50,000 emails that they had with particular interest given to certain emails of John Podesta, where he and Clinton are having issues. Now, folks, I don't know about you, but I want to know how the 50,000 emails were coordinated to be released with specific emails highlighted within 48 hours. And they were basically, damning if you want to take it that far. But the release of the emails also had the added effect of drowning out a very important story. The story was that the FBI and CIA issued a joint statement regarding Russian involvement in our elections, but it wasn't covered. The FBI also at that time opened up a Trump campaign investigation, but they didn't make a public announcement about it, which is pretty much par for the course. Now, in September, James Comey, and I don't, this one I truly don't understand, because the FBI, when they're doing an investigation, normally when they finish the investigation, either they will charge the party that they are investigating with a crime, or they make a simple announcement that they have concluded the investigation and it's over. For some reason, Mr. Comey decides that he's going to go into this long diatribe of why he decided not to charge Hillary Clinton, which, that was just a nail in the coffin. The second Comey nail in the coffin was placed in there by James Comey when he made an announcement that the Clinton investigation was not concluded because they found some emails on a computer that was under the control of Mr. Weiner and Ms. Humidine. Now, how they found out that Weiner had some emails to some underage girls in time for Comey to reopen this investigation, I don't know. But I got a feeling that there was some help involved here. And I'm not exactly going to say who the help came from, but I'm thinking that that help came from somebody overseas in a large country that starts with the letter R. And I also have a feeling that they knew that there wasn't really anything damaging to Clinton on the computer, but it was just enough to reactivate the investigation and to throw enough negative press out there. 2 days before the election, Comey comes out, because they scrubbed the computer and found there was nothing on there, and that he was closing the investigation. But the damage is already done. Trump wins the election with the help of the Republican Party. Now, I say with the help from approximately 2010, the Republicans had begun to take control of various state houses around the country. And around 2014, they were in control of, I believe it was 26 state houses. Now, when I say control, I mean they had the governor, the State House of Representatives, and the state Senate. That is what I call control. And when they got control, all of a sudden, the Supreme Court screws people of color, poor people, etc., by declaring Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act to be unconstitutional, so that states would no longer have to submit any changes they were making to the voting districts, lines being drawn, etc. And gerrymandering went into overdrive, as well as hundreds of voter suppression laws. Now, just so that you know, as of this video, approximately 12 states have had their voting right laws declared unconstitutional by their own state or the Court of Appeals for the federal government, and at least 5 states have been ordered to redraw their voter districts because of the extreme gerrymandering that was done, and I've done videos on that. But for 2016, the damage was done, okay? And that's how Trump was able to win. In the state of Texas, approximately 400,000 voters were turned away from the polls because of bad voter ID laws, which were later found to be unconstitutional. Approximately 200,000 voters were turned away in the state of Michigan. A large number, though I don't have the exact number, of voters were turned away in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Trump only won Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania by a total of 70,000 votes. If, let's just be nice and say 800,000 voters were turned away, and it's already been determined that the majority of those voters were democratically inclined voters, Trump would not have won. So the GOP absolutely is complicit in Trump's election. Now, these people, quote unquote, supposedly hated Trump, but in the pursuit of power, they decided to get into the pigsty and get a little dirty. You had the GOP with the white evangelicals who, quote unquote, believed in family and God and morality. They decide, because they need to get rid of Roe v. Wade, abortion rights, that they are going to get into the pigsty with Donald Trump as well. So, little dirt, according to them, never hurt anybody. And to this day, a lot of them, I don't know about the majority, but a lot of them are still supporting this immoral man. Okay, Trump's in. He's the president-elect. Here comes Mike Flynn talking to the Russians again. And this time they caught him on tape talking about sanctions. It got really thick at this point because Trump calls Comey into his office or Trump Towers, I forget what the location was, asked him for a pledge of loyalty. Comey says no. Shortly thereafter, Trump fires him and makes Sally Yates the acting FBI director. The whole thing blew up when Mike Pence, the vice president, who claims not to know anything, goes on national TV and makes a statement that Sally Yates of the FBI knows is a lie. She reports that to Donald Trump on that day, and shortly thereafter, Trump found cause to get rid of her because she wouldn't go along with him on the Muslim ban. Again, something that is separating the country because it just didn't make sense. Okay, fine, she's out. Trump puts a temporary person in by the name of McCabe. But he gets ticked off at McCabe because, one, Comey had already appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee, made his statements about what Trump did as far as trying to get loyalty from him and stopping him on the Flynn investigation, and also stating that he had told several people, of which McCabe was one of them. Oh, and I digress. After Sally Yates got the axe, oh, I'm sorry, after Sally Yates informed the White House counsel, which in turn informed Donald Trump, you can't tell me they didn't, Donald Trump left Mike Flynn in place for 18 days, knowing full well that he had lied to the FBI and they were going to have a thumb on him. Okay. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, in his confirmation hearing, lies to Congress, not once, not twice, but multiple times. It was so bad that he had to go back and issue corrections 3 times on his testimony. And they called him back in to retestify, and they were raining all over him. And his main response was he didn't recall, which we all know that that was a lie. But not being totally crazy, he recuses himself from the Russian investigation. And the Assistant Attorney General, Rosenstein, after all of that goes down, there's a clamor for a special prosecutor, so he names Mueller as the special prosecutor. Trump went off on Sessions because he knew he had Sessions, and he figured that Sessions would stop any type of a special prosecutor from being named. And once Sessions stepped aside, he was back in jeopardy again. Okay, so now Trump starts going after, obviously, the special prosecutor and everybody involved in the investigation, which included McCabe. McCabe succumbed to the pressure today and has resigned from his, well, actually, he's retired from his position immediately. But let's get back to June. Mueller is getting hot and heavy on Trump's ass again in June, to the point that Trump is wants to put pressure, all kinds of pressure, on the FBI director, and he was temporary at that time, McCabe, to fire Mueller. But he couldn't do it directly, so he went to his White House counsel, and that was McGahn, and told him to go over to the FBI and tell McCabe to fire Mueller. McCabe, seeing the constitutional jeopardy writing on the wall, tells him he's not going to do it, and if he wants to make him do it, he's going to resign. But he also tells him that looking at that particular scenario, he's going to be in even more trouble than he currently is, so Trump relented. But he still wanted to get Mueller fired. He just had to try to figure out a way to do it. Okay, now that that goes down, Mueller in July has Papadopoulos. He's got Manafort and Flynn in his sights. Now, he absolutely had Papadopoulos because they grabbed him when he came off a plane coming back from overseas. And it was also at that time, in July through September, that Mueller started pulling financial records because somebody was spilling the beans. And I am here to tell you, I think the one that was spilling the beans was Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn had ties into Turkey and into the Bank of Cyprus, which is also a major Russian money laundering bank. And he probably dropped a dime on Donald Trump as far as the financing, and especially through Deutsche Bank. Okay, now Trump knows what's going down, and he starts attacking the Department of Justice and the FBI in earnest. Trump is going after anybody and everybody until he gets everybody out that is not specifically towing his particular line. He's currently got his sights set on Rosenstein now that McCabe is gone. And the reason he's got his sights set on Rosenstein is because only Rosenstein can fire Mueller. Sessions can't do it because he's recused, and the president doesn't have the authority to do it. So in order to get Mueller off of his ass, he's got to get the assistant attorney general to do it. And Rosenstein has said that he's not going to do it unless there's cause. There is no cause. So Donald Trump needs to get somebody in there that's going to be able to find cause. Now, I've said all this to say that Donald Trump is guilty as hell, and in my opinion, the Republicans know it. But Trump's got aces hidden up his sleeve. He's got the do nothing, I see nothing, I hear nothing, I know nothing, House of Representative people in his pocket. You have people like the Speaker of the House, who is has turned a blind eye. You have the Senate Judiciary, Grassley, who's turned a blind eye. You have the House Judiciary Committee, Devin Nunes, who is actually working for Trump, and that's confirmed by them voting to release a memo that was crafted by Nunes with highly inflammatory and biased information. Now, it was announced today that the committee that he's on has voted to release the memo to the public, but at the same time, they voted not to release the minority opinions memo to the public, and they've also voted not to allow the FBI to review the documents before the release. So now you tell me, folks, they are now going to put a piece of propaganda out there, okay, that does have its detractors, but they are not allowing you to see the other side of the coin. So this basically is going back to the 1950s, and you basically got a Joe McCarthy floating around here, basically accusing the FBI of everything under the sun. You got a Vladimir Putin puppet in the White House. You have Senate and House of Representatives, Republicans that are in those bodies that are complicit, all in the name of power. They want to hold on to power as much as possible, and they don't care how dirty they get in order to hold on to that power. America is going to hell in a handbasket, and it's the Republicans that are helping to lead the way. Just one man's opinion, but I think I got enough facts to support the opinion that I have.